It says live.
Says live.
Okay, excellent. Now, let's see if that affects the page.
Well, it says it's live on the page.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it says live, and that's it.
So do you see us on the page?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's it.
I don't, but that's okay. All right, well, I will go ahead with my introduction then. Unfortunately, it seems like Stephanie Wojtowicz is not going to be able to make it today, and she was supposed to be our moderator, so it looks like I'll be filling in. So I just wanted to do a short introduction. I'm Jennifer Barnes. I am an editor for Raw Dog Screaming Press, and I wanted to thank everyone for participating, and those of you who were hoping to come to our live event at Ukazoo Books, we appreciate that you are going to come out. We had to postpone that due to the weather, but we'll probably be having a new date in March, and I will spread the word once we have verified the date. I thought I'd say a few words about why we wanted to do this type of an event for Women in Horror Month. When we first started Raw Dog Screaming Press in 2003, we wanted to publish cross-genre fringe fiction, and we wanted to do things that couldn't be easily categorized. Now, we kind of figured that that would mean that we would publish people who weren't normally published, but that wasn't part of our mandate. So after we had been publishing for 5 or 6 years, I looked at the breakdown and realized that we had only published books from 2 women. I was astounded that essentially 99% of the books we had put out were by men. I had no idea how that had happened. So I began to look around and try and figure out why, when we certainly believed that women could write and write well, how we would have wound up with that kind of breakdown. So that's when it hit me that treating people equally is not enough. It's not enough simply to treat women the same as men. You can't treat one group of people differently for centuries and then just say that they're equal. They're not. They really haven't had the same opportunities, and therefore they can't reach the same potential. So I didn't want to publish anyone just because of their gender. I didn't want to publish people just because they were women. So instead we decided what we needed to do was provide more opportunities. We no longer ignored an author's gender. If we came across a woman that was writing fringe fiction, we would show interest, try and build a relationship, offer more opportunities. We also diversified the types of fiction we published. And I'm happy to say that only after doing that for a couple years, last year we published 25% of our books were by women. And those books were top-notch books. We have 3 titles under consideration for the preliminary ballot for the Bram Stoker Award right now. Stephanie Wojtowicz is one. She has her book Morning Glory, who's under consideration. Also, Lucy Snyder, who did this collection, Soft Apocalypses, and Maria Alexander's Mr. Wicker. So that says to me that only a little bit of effort is required to make a big difference. So I really appreciate everyone who showed interest and came to this event or wanted to go to the live event and watching the online event, and tell you that it just takes that little extra step to support. So we really appreciate that. Okay, so many of you may know some of our panelists, but I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and we're going to start with Jessica McHugh.
Hi, everyone. Like Jen said, my name is Jessica McHugh, author of speculative fiction all the way from horror and horror erotica to young adult. So it's kind of a stretch there, but I've been writing since I was 19, though I didn't have my first book published until I was about 25. And in that time, I've had 17 books published, and not trying to stop anytime soon, because there are lots of different playgrounds to play on, and I'm really glad for people like Raw Dog and Postmortem and some really great publishers that are publishing horror and recognizing that women are just as capable, and if not maybe a little bit more in some cases than men, and we can write just things that are just as gross and wonderful. So thank you so much for having me today.
You're very welcome. We're glad to have you. Next up, I think I would like to hear what Deena Warner has to say. She's actually an illustrator, so I was really happy to have someone who is involved in the visual side of horror, because I think that's an important side and an interesting take. So, Deena, you want to do an introduction?
Okay, hi. My name is Deena Warner, and I am an illustrator of novels and CDs and movie posters, and I'm also a website designer. And I started out primarily being a fan of horror fiction. I've been reading it as long as I've been reading. And when it came time to say, what is your senior thesis illustration project going to be in college, the first thing I did was say I wanted to illustrate horror novels. So I did a whole series of horror novel covers for my senior thesis project, and my teacher said, you should probably try to do this. And so I started reaching out to horror publishers and started to present my work, and over time was able to get work published in ebook format and then eventually in print work, including with Raw Dog Screaming Press. So I've been publishing printing my illustrations for about 15 years, and actually, I'm probably more well known for website design, but I'm trying to have 3 or 4 illustrations out every year, including an annual Halloween card that I send out to all my friends in the horror genre, because I just love Halloween and love to share it. So in preparation for coming to this event, I said, well, I'm going to talk about a lot of the other horror illustrators that I'm fans of that are female. And going through that research, I realized there aren't very many. And it made me realize that most of my appearances at convention panels or art shows have been boy, 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 and me. So it really made me realize, there's some very notable illustrators that are female, like Jill Bowman, but overall, it's a lot of men. And it took me preparing for this to realize that. So I'm excited to share my perspective as a woman in this illustration field that's also heavily dominated by men. So thank you for having me.
I'm really glad that you, because I also was like, well, I'd really like to have somebody who represents like the visual aspect of it, and there was only a couple people that I could think of. One was Kristen Margiata, who did our illustrations for this book. But other than Deena's illustrations and Kristen's, I'm not really familiar with a lot of female. So just there's an example of that. And also, here's one of the covers that Deena did for us. So I wanted to show that. All right, Damien, you want to do your introduction?
Okay. Hello, all. Although I'm wondering, are people here?
I have spoken to someone in the outside world who can see us.
Oh, okay then.
My husband?
No, it wasn't your husband.
Okay.
But I'm going to see, after we do our introductions, I'll see if people can ask us questions.
Okay, great. All right. My name is Damien Angelica Walters, and I write horror, contemporary fantasy, soft science fiction. My first short fiction collection is coming out in 2 weeks from Apex Publications. I actually have a proof copy, so this is the first time the actual physical book has been seen in the wild.
Stop showing porn.
Let's see. I did not set out to be a horror writer. Like many people, I grew up reading Stephen King, Peter Straub, Shirley Jackson. I tended to be drawn to darker fiction. But when I started writing, I had no idea what I was writing. If you asked me if I'm a horror writer, I would probably say, label me however you want. I don't know. I just write. However, something that I've noticed over the years that drives me batty is that if you ever see someone post a list of, hey, favorite horror authors, there's a very good chance that most, if not all, of that list will be male authors. And it's one of those things, you see it, it hurts you, but you don't say anything, because why? You don't want to make waves. And unfortunately, if the list were all female authors, I'm quite certain that male authors would speak up. So I think that it's important to have a Women in Horror Month for that fact, to just say, hey, we are here. And, you know, just yesterday, the day before, I saw somebody post an apologetic post on Facebook about how they didn't read female authors very much. And, you know, if nothing else, that maybe it helps get the message out that, hey, women do write too, and, you know, we're not just writing bodice rippers that may appeal to a mostly female segment of the population. You know, we're writing all sorts of things, and our voices are valid, our stories are valid, and, you know, you've got that joke where men say, oh, well, I don't understand women. Well, maybe read some fiction written by women. Maybe you'll see that we're not all that different, really. Okay. Is that enough? Hopefully. That was babbling.
So, John, since you're featured there on the chat, do you want to do an introduction? And also, I hear that there are some questions from the audience, but I can't see them. So, do you see them at all?
I don't. I see nothing.
They're not showing up for me in the chat here on the sidebar.
It's only on the watch page.
Oh, okay. So, John, why don't you do a short introduction, and then can you go to the watch page and...
If you click on Q&A, they show up.
Oh, okay.
Well, I see people saying I'm here.
What does here really mean?
But I don't know, maybe they haven't asked questions. Maybe we can get somebody to ask a question and see if it pops up in chat.
Okay, I do see some questions now.
You see it in chat?
Or some comments that they are here. I don't see the questions. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll just introduce myself real quick, and then we'll get to the questions. My name is John Edward Lawson. I am Jennifer's co-conspirator in Raw Dog Screaming Press and our various imprints, Dogstar Books, Imaginary Books, Guide Dog Books, and I feel much the same way as Jennifer. I really enjoy women authors. In terms of my own career as an author, I'm a Bram Stoker Award finalist, Wonderland Award finalist, been nominated for the Riesling Award a couple times, the Dwarf Stars Award a couple times, the Elgin Award, the Pushcart Prize, and for publishing fiction and poetry. And for myself, I know that some of the women authors I enjoy have had a profound influence, and I could not have done any of the stuff I've done without their influence. They've majorly... you know, most of my poetry is directly influenced, for instance, by Sylvia Plath. I'd like to see much more awareness. It's like people feel like if you mention a woman author, you're just throwing something out there as like this token thing, when really it's quite the opposite. I mean, where would science fiction and horror be without Mary Shelley doing her thing way before Edgar Allan Poe? So anyway, I've been very lucky to work with the authors I've been working with, especially, of course, the women. And I'm really glad that we had this event. In fact, I'd like to see this continue on into next month. I know next month, March, is Women's History Month, and I'd like to see the discussion continue then, too. But for the time being, in terms of the discussion, let's see what the questions are coming in from the audience.
Okay, I do have one question from Matthew Warner, And his question is, how do you think being a female informs your choice of subject matter? Anyone want to jump on that one?
I mean, I could answer that from my perspective. Is it influences me just as much as pretty much any other human experience, I believe. Everybody's lives are different. Obviously, the thing I can talk about from a women's point of view is women's bodies and whatnot, because I have firsthand knowledge of that area. And but I mean, we all experience different things through life, so that gender has no. It really doesn't matter. I mean, if you've grown up in a family with an addict, man or woman, you have that experience. If you've experienced a parent die, you know, everybody has different experiences through life and death and troubles. And I really don't think that. I think as writers, it's our job to get to know all experiences and all different kinds of personalities. So to me, I don't think it has too much bearing when I write a story, unless it's about periods.
From an artistic perspective, most of the time I don't have a lot of choice in what I'm putting in my image because it's bound by the characters in a particular novel. But when I am given that choice, like I'm given free reign, I grab the opportunity and say, since I'm a woman, this is my chance to bring women more to the forefront. And one of the examples I can think of is when I was asked to do the Stoker Award cover a few years ago. They said, do an image that's elegant and represents horror. And I said, well, a woman, of course. But I said, well, I want to show that women are not just, you know, fetish people who are into goth and are crazy. You know, it can be beautiful and elegant and scary at the same time. And so I just wanted to show a more diverse representation of women so they weren't pigeonholed into one stereotype. So I think through an image, you're able to do that instantly because people can just glance at it quickly and understand that. So anytime that I have that opportunity, I try to show a wider representation of what women can be. And they're just as diverse as any other group of society. So.
Yeah, I found it a challenge when I was trying to design graphics for this particular event because there are a lot of sort of stereotypical images involving women and horror, and I didn't want to do that. But it was a challenge, and I was really happy when I settled on the heart as a muscle, because the muscle thing is kind of gory, kind of bloody, and women are often associated with the heart and love, but showing it as like a muscle was kind of cool. So anyway, Damien, did you have anything you wanted to say?
You know, I do. I think that being a woman definitely informs what shapes what I write about, shapes how I write about it. I hate to use the term sensitivity, but I have written stories about abuse. I have, and I believe that from a woman's perspective, I'm not looking to glorify it. I'm not looking to show it as something voyeuristic, as something that, oh, hey, this happened. I'm not trying to accuse male authors of doing that. However, there is a difference. I think that there is a sensitivity that I don't think that it's inherent to being a woman, but I think it's inherent to me that if I'm going to write about something very disturbing, I want to handle it in a delicate fashion, and I want to make it about more than just the abuse or the ugliness. I want to make it about what's underneath, what's inside of it, what's real. I don't know. Maybe if I were a man, maybe that's just because of who I am. But I think that being a woman, and you know, I've had children, you know, I've raised children. There is all of that. And again, though, it's it's all of our experiences of life, and so having been through some pretty horrible things, they may shape that, but still, I do think that women have a different perspective when it comes to bigger topics. We see things a little bit differently. We describe those things a little bit differently because I don't know.
Well, I think, it's an old joke, men talking about how women overanalyze things, or, what did he mean by this? What did he mean by this? And we go into it, and it's an old joke, but I mean, it's kind of true, and it's kind of beautiful. Because when women experience something, especially women writers, when we experience something, we go deeper and deeper and keep peeling and keep peeling and keep peeling, and I think it turns into a really, really beautiful story, especially when you're talking about a subject like that. It can turn into something really beautiful because it becomes about the reflection rather than the violence of it.
All right, well, that is all very interesting answers. I think we have another question here. This one is, in general, how does one prepare mentally before writing a character of the opposite sex? And for this one, I'm going to call on John first, since when he writes a character of the opposite sex, he has to do a female character. So let's see what he knows about that.
Okay. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Okay.
Listen.
And this one actually came from Dave McHugh. How do you prepare to write a character from the opposite sex mentally?
Okay. Well, for me, I have to look at you turn on its head. I look at what men do, and so what I'm used to doing. It seems like men tend to operate in a much more insular environment where you can sort of brusquely go around doing things without having to think about the consequences quite as much, because as a man you are not as likely to face consequences in certain situations. So I will go through that. I will study women's opinions on things online. I will go through a draft. I will try to get opinions from the women authors and readers I know. I might slip some things into conversations with you, Jennifer, sort of surreptitiously feeling you out on different things. So you're sort of a beta audience without even knowing it half the time. So I mean, I do like talking to you, of course, there's that too.
Glad to hear it.
Even after years of doing this, 16 years, and I do really like working with. For me, the most fun thing is perspective, and how that can really alter, even just within one story, shifting to a different perspective, a different character, creates a completely different story. So from the very beginning, I've always been working with like as many different kinds of characters as I possibly can. Including, of course, women. But even still doing that, I so many years later find myself, having to go back and fix things that I'm clearly getting wrong. But it's one of those things where it's easier the more you do it. And as an author, you just sort of have to be able to imagine yourself, well, if I was this person in this situation, what would I do? That's only natural. Of course, being a man, I have to sort of go by proxy and work with what I hear the women around me would do in these situations.
All right. Anyone else want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, with the internet, I mean, that's a very good thing. It's a great resource that we have nowadays. You can browse forums, and I mean, I think one of my most recent books, Green Kangaroos, is written first-person male, and it was one of my favorite novel writing experiences I ever had, because I just love getting into a character that's so different from myself, even though I'll admit I'm a little dudeish. So, you know, I have kind of my things there. But to me, it was more about trying to find because he's an addict, trying to learn about the addict first, and then kind of seeing in forums and my own experiences with my family and people I know, kind of the little differences between them. When you're talking about a character like that, there are differences between the genders, but not hugely, because your focus is just the drug and not so much what else is going. It's just drug. So for me, yeah, it's just about watching how people respond to certain you know, situations I would put online and stuff. You always say, I'm working on a book. What's this? You know, what's this question? You kind of crowdsource your your research a little bit, which is always interesting to see how different people respond. So I think that the internet is a great resource, and just keeping your eyes and ears open and absorbing everything that's going on around you. One of my favorite things about writing in restaurants and bars and stuff like that.
All right, Damien, did you have?
Yeah, I don't think necessarily I do any initial preparation. I have noticed I tend to write more female characters, but every once in a while I'll have a story and I'll start writing, and I know that it's a man, and I don't know that I really approach it any differently. I have hit sticky points where I've written something and thought, I don't know if a guy would do this, and so I've, you know, asked someone who would know and say, hey, would this happen in that situation? And, you know, most of the time it's no. You would be more like this. You know, I don't know. I think that I'm more of an intuitive writer. If a character tells me that he's a guy, then he's a guy. If a character is, most of the time I write my main characters are women. It's easier, but in other ways it's maybe not necessarily so, because the characters are not me and they're completely different, and they're reacting to the environment that I'm creating for them. I think perhaps I have to, when I write a male character, it's just kind of scaling back on some of the thought processes that are more feminine. And yet, I don't know, I trust the characters. So if they, however they want to come across, they come across. If somebody is not, you know, and with fiction, I mean, we're not reading to get glimpses into our own minds. We're reading to get glimpses into a character's mind. And even if they don't necessarily think the way we do, it doesn't necessarily pigeonhole them to a gender, or, you know, people are people. I mean, I know women who are more, I hate to say, like, you know, one of the guys, but yes, and then I know guys that are more, they're just more feminine. So you know, I don't know. People are people.
So oh, sorry.
Nope, that's it. I'm good.
People are people was a good wrap up. Deena, I didn't know if you have anything to say about perspective and that kind of thing in the, you know, visual side of things.
Well, I can talk more in terms of being a reader and like a beta reader and working with writers that I know and workshopping their own fiction. Mm-hmm. And what I've figured out is that, like we just heard, people are people, and we don't live our lives in a vacuum. I don't hang out with all women, and most men don't hang out with all men. You see people every day, and I think, and we all have this natural sense of the men and women in our lives and how they react to things and what sorts of things they would do. So the keys are just to be observant and be natural, and just, you know the people that you know, draw on people that you know, and even if they aren't stereotypes, just say, hey, you know, my husband acts this way, so I know that if I would put a character in that acts the way he does, I'm pulling from reality. So I think that just trust yourself. I mean, we're all human beings. We've been interacting with people our whole lives of both genders and all races and all different types of people. And so you don't have to think so hard or focus so much on the demarcations of what they are, you know, what gender they are, or what sorts of roles they fit in. Just say, who is this person, and how have their experiences shaped them, and how are they like real people that I know? And when you stop trying to pigeonhole them and say, what would a man do in this situation, and look at it more, what would a real person or my character do, then those things sort of fall away, and you just make a more true character.
Okay, well, it looks like we have another question here from Emery Pochel. Have we gotten any questions from Emery yet, Jennifer?
No. I think...
Okay.
Well, go ahead.
Okay. His question is, what are some of the difficulties you have experienced as a writer that may be unique to being a woman in genre fiction? Obviously, I cannot answer that one.
Oh, nice one. That's why you chose it, isn't it? So you don't have to answer.
Erasure.
It's tough because I feel like I was blissfully ignorant for many of the years that I've been writing. I seriously thought that I didn't think that there was any kind of discrimination, because I'm like, hey, I'm just a person writing fiction. I really didn't I didn't know. And a couple years ago I probably when I first stumbled upon Women in Horror Month, then I saw the backlash that would, because there's always one guy that always needs to ruin it for everybody, step forward and that kind of stuff. So, and I was like, wait a minute, slow down here. I'm writing characters. This is all make-believe. We're all playing make-believe. Why does it matter what's between my legs? I don't get it. And yeah, I was appalled. And then I started to realize that women are viewed, especially when writing horror, people just assume it's going to be soft horror, like romance. Oh my God, my guy ran away. Oh, that's horror, something like that. And it was just strange because I had written so many gory and things, and now I don't want to go back to being blissfully ignorant at all. But now when I see the comments, I'm just like, well, they clearly are idiots. And I'll just move on and continue on with my life writing kick-ass horror while owning a vagina.
Good move. Yeah, I also would say that when I started out in this field, I just thought, I knew from childhood that there was this idea that men were better than women, but I thought it was just this outmoded idea that everybody would just get over, and I would just go on ahead and do my thing, and we would all just evolve past that. So it was kind of a shock to me then, once I got older, that hadn't really happened, that people were still thinking these same, having these old ideas. Like, for instance, John and I run the company together, but there are a lot of people who just assume that he's the one in charge, he's the one that you need to talk to, that kind of thing. It doesn't really hasn't really held me back per se, but it's always been there. So I'm, when I first heard of Women in Horror Month, at first I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. But also at the same time, I was like, well, do we really have to focus on the fact that it's women? It seemed a little bit silly. But then when you look around and you see, if you actually count the numbers, that's when you can really see that it's not equal. And then to find that our own company had such a division was really surprising. So I kind of lost track of my thought. Okay, anyone else have something they want to say?
Well, I can say that most of my difficulties have been more in people's perception than reality. Like, people will just hear, oh, you do artwork, oh, and it's dark, and you like to read horror fiction, and they just have this reaction of, oh, why would you want to do that? And especially as a woman, why would you want to read that kind of stuff or draw that kind of stuff? Why don't you draw something nice? And it all sort of melts away in a sense when people see the actual work or hang out a little bit more or get to know you more. It's like, oh, well, it's always from people that are a little more outside that just sort of have an idea of what you're doing rather than what you're actually doing. And when they see it and when they talk to you and when they hear your side of things a little bit more, I found most people are pretty cool and just sort of go, oh, well, yeah, all right, now that I can see what you're doing, it's kind of cool. But it's always sort of the people that you meet, like at cocktail parties or, at social events that you say, oh, hi, I do horror book illustrations. They just kind of look at you like, oh, okay. But so I don't feel like I've had any difficulty professionally, and I haven't had any difficulty once people sort of got inside and were really paying attention or more interested. It's more kind of a fringe kind of public perception more than anything else that has given me any sort of static.
Damien, you had originally said erasure.
Uh-huh. Yes. Okay. One thing that I've noticed, I've gone to a couple conventions, and you see people on, Facebook and Twitter. Male authors tend to, now, I'm going to start this, not all men. I understand that. Get that out of the way.
Hashtag.
More likely, yeah, hashtag. They're more likely to recommend books written by other men. They're more likely when they list, hey, these are the authors you should be reading right now. More likely to be a list of men. Maybe there'll be a token woman. Maybe. And I don't think that, I know that I certainly do not want any special treatment, and I do not want to have anyone include me in anything because I'm a woman. No. But I think that often there are a lot of people who don't think beyond that sphere of, these are my buddies. These are the guys that I read, or that I'm friends with. And so there is some erasure, but it's also a bit alienating, because then what do we have to do to say we're here too? I have found, that especially at a convention, you'll walk into a room and you've got a whole bunch of male writers, and you get the look, and you really have to kind of, as a woman, you have to kind of go in and kind of make it known that, hey, I'm a writer too. But there's a way that guys talk to guys when they're all together. And I think that there are some women who tend to think that, okay, to be in the boys club, you have to be one of the boys and you have to talk like one of the boys. Not going to do it. Not going to do it. Just like, oh, well, if you're going to write horror fiction and you want to play in the boys club, then you have to write really violent rape scenes and ooh, ah. Yeah, no, not going to do it. So, yeah, and I kind of lost my train of thought, and I swear I'm not correcting, because most of the people, I mean, once you actually talk to people, then it's different. Then they don't see you as, but I think it's that initial impression of, why is she in our club? Whoever that she is, why are they here? Because men typically, dominated the horror field, so that, it's a little bit of the, oh, we're opening our doors and are we going to have to change things? Are we going to have to, but we liked it the way that it was. It's a little, sometimes people don't like change, and they want things the way they always were, even if things the way they always were weren't great for everyone except them.
I think that's especially
that's diplomatic
the time when you don't want it to change.
Yes.
All right, we have another question. Oh, did you have one?
I just wanted to ask a question from Joseph Bathia Jr.
Okay.
He wanted to know what upcoming books by women authors everyone is looking forward to, horror or otherwise.
I'm looking forward to Damien's. I want that.
Actually, yeah, me
that
too.
one. That's on my to-read list like crazy.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
Yeah, let's see it. But she has to.
Yeah, that's the one I want.
And when is that officially going to be out?
March 9th. 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks? 16 days, 17 days? Not that I'm
Tell us
counting.
more about it.
Sounds awesome.
Oh, talk about it. It's a collection of 20 short stories ranging from horror to dark fantasy. There is one story that would be considered soft science fiction. It has a Henry VIII robot. AI, I guess, technically. He's a little bit more than a robot. A review just came out this morning, which I believe said the title should be, hold on, I'm looking it up. I like it when you cry. Said it was not a beach read, and I would say no. Putting it together, I went for thematic similarities, and I mean, Sing Me Your Scars. That should give you an indication. It's not a beach read. Hopefully it will make your...
Unless you, like, hang out on some dark, foreboding beach.
You know, I mean, hopefully I don't need to give people a side of Prozac with it, but I like to explore things that hurt, and I do, and not physically. I like to explore, for me, horror is the feeling, and not necessarily what's happening, but how it makes you feel. And people are the cruelest monsters.
I kind of like that topic. And if you have upcoming books you want to talk about, you could go ahead and take that. But I'd also like to hear what Deena and Jess feel, how they would describe horror and what horror is to them, if they're interested in talking about that.
I mean, I basically in the interview you posted, I definitely spoke a lot about that. Horror to me is basically the most accessible emotion, horror, fear, all that kind of stuff, because I think it definitely transcends genres. It doesn't stay in its own genre, I believe. I mean, I'm writing a young adult series, and that thing is just loaded with a different side of horror. Just so many different kinds of being terrified and scared, as far as, like, I just wrote a scene where the main character falls on a table and knocks out her tooth. So not only do I get to describe the horrible, bloody pain of knocking out your tooth on a table in front of the boy you were just trying to make out with, but then you have the horror of, is this a permanent tooth or a baby tooth? Oh crap, school is starting in a week and I have a hole in my face. You know, there's so many different things, and we all feel so many different branches of horror throughout our lives, and I love to describe it all the way from gore to our most internal of fears.
Yeah, I think that ultimately it comes down to what you're terrified of, but I think it can also be not necessarily an external force that scares you, but it can be exploring the things within you that scare you. So a lot of the best horror is people looking at themselves and saying, what impulses do I have? What thoughts have I been having? You know, what have I discovered inside myself that terrifies me? Because I think most of us spend a lot of our time exploring ourselves and exploring our role in the world, because we are our own, narrator. And so it has to do with fear and also with the exploration of fear. So not necessarily always something actively chasing you or trying to harm you, or being in a situation that you are terrified of an external force, but just anything that causes you to examine fear or darkness in any sort of situation, whether it's inside yourself or with other people.
Okay, let's see.
Should we mention some other books? Because the question, we spun off. on
Please.
other books that we're looking forward to?
Mm-hmm. Or
I can tell you.
open it up to any. I think it's a little bit hard. I couldn't think of any coming up, but also if there's other writers that you enjoy that are women in other books, go ahead and mention those too.
All right. Well, She Walks in Shadows, which is coming out from Innsmouth Free Press, which is an anthology of Lovecraftian stories. Now, I really love short fiction, so I tend to notice anthologies a little bit more. They jump on my radar. And then there's also coming out, full disclosure, I've got a story in it, Casilda's Song, which will be all King in Yellow tales and all from women. That's forthcoming, I believe, later this year. And there was one more, and I'm drawing a total blank, and I'm looking for it, and I'm like, it was another anthology of all women, which I think in some ways that a lot of these anthologies, whether they're Lovecraftian or just horror, I think it gives readers, especially say, someone who doesn't read a lot of female authors, whether it's a man or a woman. With an anthology, you get a feel for someone's voice, and you get a feel for their storytelling, and you can kind of say, oh, okay, I kind of like that writer. Maybe I'll go look at some other things. So I think that for someone who maybe has not read a lot of fiction by women, that perhaps something like that is a good springboard, a good place to start. And if I can remember the name of the other one.
Is it something about shadows?
She Walks in Shadows.
Oh,
Upper Rubber Boot Press is doing the 35 Women Behaving Badly.
Yes.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
I don't think that's all.
I'm in that one too. Aren't you in that one, Jess?
Yes!
Okay. In everything. Female authors taking over the anthology.
Yeah.
Girl cooties everywhere. Oh, God. That was just like put on video forever, right?
Well, I had to look up at my board with everything written on it. I'm like, wait, what was it called?
There was something else, and I can't remember. I think it was, Dreams from the Witch House?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Is that coming out?
Yes.
Yes. That looks like it's going to be great.
Yeah.
So those are the things that I've noticed recently that I'm looking forward to. Let's see, other writers. Some writers who are not necessarily considered horror writers. E. Catherine Tobler. She is also the editor at Shimmer Magazine. She writes some wickedly awesome stuff. And full disclosure, she and I have written a novelette together. But she is phenomenal. Sunny Moraine is another one. Maria Devana Headley. I'm sneaking over to my Facebook page because Helena Bell is another one. I did a whole list of a bunch of stories. Kidge Johnson. If you've never read Kidge Johnson, oh my God. Spar is my favorite story ever.
I'm in the middle of reading Pretty Little Dead Girls.
Okay.
By Mercedes Yarley.
Mm-hmm. Let me see.
I'm in the middle of reading a lot of books.
Livia Llewellyn. Livia Llewellyn is probably the best female horror author right now. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry to me. I'm sorry to She is so skilled that I kind of hate her. I love her, but for anyone who's not written her work, it feels better biting down in Nightmare Magazine. Holy crap. Talk about just disturbing and dark, but her writing is so beautiful. Her short fiction collection, my library is downstairs, so I can't, it's Engines of Desire. I mean, she can probably out-disturb most male authors, but she writes so beautifully that it's, oh almost like if you like Tori Amos, she has these beautiful lyrics that you don't really notice they're cutting you into pieces until you look down and realize that you're bleeding. Yeah, she is, and I think that she's sadly not as well known as she should be.
Well, two of my favorites, my favorite female horror writer or dark fiction writer is Charlaine Harris, and I know that she is one of the most famous ones, especially since True Blood was made into a series. But all of her less famous work is outstanding as well. And what I like about her the most is that she's so accessible, and she lulls you into thinking, oh, I'm just reading a nice little cozy mystery, and then it gets very, very dark. And so I think people that may not necessarily say, why would I read a dark story by a woman? You can hand them a Charlaine Harris book, and they'll just kind of ease into it and just think it was a very nice story, and then realize at the end, oh my gosh, I just read this terrifying ghost, angsty story. And it was written by a woman, and it was very confident. I think everyone who's read her has enjoyed her. So I think she's very approachable to people, even people that may not want to dive into some small press horror or a little bit leery about it. I think she's just very accessible to everybody. And another one of my favorites is Lucy Snyder, which I know has been recently published with Raw Dog. But she is just so smart, and her intelligence comes through in her writing, and she can write in just about any genre. She can write in nonfiction, instruction manuals, just sci-fi, fantasy, and her work kind of blends between so many different genres. But she can go in very dark places and in very funny places at the same time. And I just think that her work shines through and is outstanding no matter what she tries to do. It makes me a little bit jealous. I think that her experience and her intelligence and her femininity just always shine through in what she works on.
That's an excellent point. We probably should also mention Elizabeth Massey. Deena and I have both know her. But it's interesting when you say one thing about Lucy is that she can write in many genres, and it's very convincing. And I was thinking about that a lot of the thing about women in horror is that when a woman writes a horror story or novel, it's more likely to be classified as something else, I think. For instance, a lot of Gillian Flynn's books are pretty dark, and I think they could be considered horror, but they're marketed as thrillers because I think it's because she's a woman. I recently read this book called You by Caroline Kepnes. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce her name. Again, it was the same thing where it was kind of like, it was really pretty much a horror book, but I think they pushed it more as a thriller. So do you guys think that's true, or am I totally off base with that?
I didn't until you just said it.
But
Because now that I think about it. Yeah.
That's just the big presses with marketing.
Yeah,
I think it's more marketing than anything else.
Thriller, when they're technically, they're horror, but they're also thrilling. But yeah, they're classified as thrillers. Huh.
Well, I think if you go into any bookstore, there used to be horror sections, like entire areas of the bookstore, 3 and 4 shelves wide, with the horror section, and now you go in and they've just completely taken them out, except for in a few exceptions. So I don't think it's as much a gender thing as a marketing thing. They're just saying horror doesn't sell, horror's passé. So if we market it as dark fantasy or market it as thriller, then people will be more likely to buy it because everyone's scared away by horror. I hope that changes and swings back in our favor, but I don't know if it's as much a male-female thing as it is a marketing strategy.
I think
also, I wanted to follow up. There's something I was wondering about with Deena. Do you know of any? There are frequently collections of horror art books by horror artists. Do you know of any by female horror artists, or if so, could you recommend any?
I know that there are often often artist anthologies of individual artists' work. Like I can just think, for example, Keith Minion just had a book that came out called Dark Art, which collected all of his work, and I know John Picacio had one, and Caniglia had one. So I think that it's a very common thing, but I cannot think off the top of my head of any woman's artwork that I've ever seen collected that way. And it may just be because they just haven't gotten the notoriety or the widespread, exposure that a lot of the male artists have gotten. But I can do a little research for you, but I can't think of one off the top of my head. Although they're usually reserved for the people who have had a very long career and have enough work to fill a book like that. And as I was telling you earlier, I can't think of that many female artists that have just put out that wide body of work. But I'm going to research a little bit and see if I can answer that better for you, because I would be curious to know that as well.
Okay, thanks.
But I'd like to see that.
I think we'll have to probably be wrapping this up pretty soon. I wasn't able to get to everyone's questions, but I just did want to thank Joseph Balthiet for putting in some questions, and Bill Hamilton. Trying to see who else. Daniel Wilcox, Chris Stout. Thank you guys. If you're out there watching, we appreciate it. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to everybody's questions.
We could just do like rapid fire answers, maybe.
Some of the questions were kind of duplicating things that I think that we sort of answered, and it's a little hard to.
Yeah, because we've already talked about some female authors.
Here's one. I'm not sure who. I can't tell who sent it in, but it said. Because Matt Warner had asked about the portrayal of women in horror movies, and this person
followed up,
wants to know about if you ever feel pressured to dumb down female characters. So you could take either one of those things, how you feel about the portrayal of women in horror. And I'm pretty sure you guys are going to say that even if you felt pressure to dumb down women, you wouldn't do it. But anyway, go ahead.
I wouldn't.
I mean, if the character was supposed to be an idiot, man or woman, if the character is an idiot, then the character should be an idiot. But I mean, I'm not going to give women. I'm not going to prefer women over men to make the character an idiot. If I'm writing a story and it. I have an ensemble cast of women basically in the novel Pins. Not all of those women who work as strippers are going to be wonderful, upstanding, intelligent people. Some of them are going to be trash. So, I mean, I'm not going to make someone better than they are just because I want to show all women in a good light. Not all women are great, just like not all men are great. So...
Okay, does anyone want to talk about the portrayal of women in horror? Really quick.
Really quick, it's crappy. It's been crappy for a long time. Women, you're either the slut or you're the good girl. And if you're the slut, you die. And if you're the good girl, well, if you have sex, you die. For a very long time in horror, women are put into tiny little boxes, and that's their role, and that's everything that they get. It doesn't matter, and everything is viewed through the lens of a man. So if a woman is cute, then what the camera shows or what the book shows is her bra size and whether she prefers thongs to bikinis. So I think that it gets tiresome after a while as a woman watching, because women come in a whole different range of characters. So I think that perhaps women bring a little more of that into the table, that say, hey, we're not just the final girl who's the good girl or the slut who's going to get killed in the first 10 minutes. There are a whole lot of women, and we can fit into a lot of different roles. Yeah. So that's my take.
Anyone else want to?
I think what frustrates me in some of the more modern movies of all genres is what I've seen people call the Trinity problem, which is where people really want to write a strong female character. They write this really awesome intro scene where a woman comes in and kicks everybody out of the scene and is awesome and is wearing leather and is just really cool, and then they're not given anything else to do the whole rest of the movie because people are like, hey, I put that strong female character in there, but then they're like, yeah, but all she did the whole rest of the movie was look up to her guy and like say how wonderful he was and follow him around everywhere. So I think that people are really trying to put women in there, but they just think, okay, well, I've got to put a really strong, kick-ass female. And it's like, well, that means give her decisions to make that affect the plot. You know, make her make mistakes. You know, make her be a fully fleshed character and not just someone who can beat up on the boys, because
or don't
that's
just
great.
Provide inspiration for the man.
Yeah.
Right. So give her a role and make the plot, not just the character, but make the plot work in a way that she's got stuff to do and that she affects the outcome of the story. And that's what I want to see more of.
All right, very good. Well, I guess we will wrap it up here. I just want to say that I hope anybody watching will look up these ladies and their work. You can Google Damien Angelica Walters, Deena Warner, and Jessica McHugh. You can also go to our website. We posted interviews with, we're doing a series of blog interviews for Women in Horror Month. So we have interviews for each of these panelists, and Stephanie Wojtowicz, who couldn't be here, she's done some pretty good women in horror blogs this month. And again, really appreciate you taking the time to view and think about women in horror, and hopefully, you know, we'll be able to continue the discussion and improve things for.
One day we won't need a Women in Horror Month. Wouldn't that be great?
Yes, that would be awesome. All right, I'm going to go ahead and vlog us out. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.